The invitation came late, so late I was sure it was a mistake. My cousin Lindsay was getting married, and the whole family had been buzzing about it for months. I heard about the engagement through a forwarded email thread. The bridal shower. A Facebook post I was tagged in after it ended, and now this wedding invitation crammed into a plain envelope with my name misspelled. Nina Monroe became Nancy Morano. That's how much I mattered to them. I looked at the thick white card in my hands. Gold trim. Dusty rose font. Classic Southern elegance. Venue a sprawling vineyard in Virginia. Time 4:30 p.m. Dress code black tie. There was even a separate card stating, "Please no children" or "unnecessary +1s." I smiled at that last part. My presence, if I went, would certainly be considered unnecessary. I hadn't spoken to most of my extended family in years, not because I didn't want to. I reached out once, twice, then stopped after realizing I was always the one sending the messages waiting for replies that never came. The last time I saw Aunt Marjorie Lindsay's mother was at a Thanksgiving dinner 7 years ago. She looked at me across the table and said, "Still working that little government desk job? Huh, sounds safe at least." Safe, if only she knew. But of course she didn't, and she couldn't. That's the whole point. Working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation isn't like the movies. It's not all running through alleyways and slapping cuffs on criminals. Sometimes it's meetings, paperwork, sleepless nights piecing together intel from fragments. Other times, it's dead silence because you can't talk about the things you've done or the things you've seen, especially not with your family. The Bureau trains you to disappear, and I did that very well. Still, the invitation gnawed at me. I wasn't angry, I was curious. Why now did they want to show off how well Lindsay was doing compared to boring little Nina? Or maybe they assumed I wouldn't come, and this was a last-minute obligation to avoid family drama. I stared at the envelope until the words blurred. Then, without thinking too hard, I RSVP'd yes. The wedding day was warm, humid. The kind of East Coast heat that clung to your neck like guilt. I arrived early, dressed in a slate gray gown, simple jewelry, hair pinned back. No fanfare, no +1, just me. I parked my car near the service entrance. The valet looked confused. "Guests are parking on the west lot, ma'am." "I'm fine here," I said. "Just needed to grab something from the trunk." He shrugged and walked away. I could feel the eyes of the catering staff on me as I reached inside the vehicle and touched the locked case hidden under a false floor. Just muscle memory. Habit. I didn't need it today, but I always checked. The venue was extravagant ivy-covered columns, strings of golden lights, champagne glasses lined up like crystal soldiers. Everything screamed curated perfection. Even the guests, with their practiced smiles and curated anecdotes, seemed plucked from a lifestyle magazine. I slipped in quietly unseen, just like I was trained to. When I found my seat, I had to laugh. It was at the edge of the outdoor reception area near the portable heaters and the emergency exit. Not a single familiar face at my table, just a few distant cousins and someone's awkward coworker. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't insulted either. I was expectant. My family always had a knack for putting people in boxes. The smart one, the pretty one, the loud one. And me, I was the one who settled. I watched Aunt Marjorie float by in a shimmering navy gown, giving air kisses to guests, her voice high and brittle with champagne joy. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Nina," she said with that smile, tight-lipped and perfectly polite. "You came." "Of course," I said, standing. "It's family?" She looked me up and down, then gave a slight tilt of her head. "Still at that little government job." I nodded. "Still there. Must be nice, steady, quiet, boring but stable." She leaned in slightly. "Nothing wrong with being average, dear. We can't all be stars." And just like that, she was gone off to the next guest, the next performance. I sat back down, the words still warm in the air around me. Average, boring, nothing wrong. It was funny in a way. Not the ha-ha kind. The kind that echoed in your chest when you've spent your life hiding only to be called invisible by the people who never truly looked. The ceremony began. Violin music floated through the air. Lindsay, glowing in white, walked down the aisle as everyone stood. Cameras flashed. Guests sniffled. Vows were exchanged. But I wasn't thinking about the ceremony. I was remembering a sting operation 3 weeks prior, when I stood silently behind a two-way mirror, listening to a terrorist confess. I was thinking about the 3 months I spent undercover in a trafficking ring, eating cold rice in a basement, and praying no one discovered the mic under my sleeve. I was thinking about the woman everyone thought they knew, and the woman I had become. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, applause erupted. People hugged. The band kicked in. Waiters passed out flutes of champagne. I declined mine. I don't drink. As the reception unfolded, I stayed quiet, blending in, listening, observing. Aunt Marjorie was holding court near the head table, telling a group of women about Lindsay's new home, her fiancé's family, the 5-tier wedding cake. Then I heard it. She used to play with Nina, remember that one with the desk job, Marjorie said with a chuckle. Still wears the same sad shoes to every event. Government work, bless her heart. Laughter.
Not cruel exactly, but dismissive. The kind that cuts deeper.
I turned my head slowly. No one noticed me watching. They never do, but that was about to change. I didn't plan to respond. I never do. That's the first thing they train into you at Quantico Control. Control your tone. Control your face. Control your presence. The moment you let emotion drive you, you're no longer in charge. So I let the laughter pass, like wind through trees. But inside, something tightened. The reception carried on. A 5-piece string band played a soft rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love. Couples swayed. Kids sneaked bites of cake. Laughter moved like a current through the crowd, but I stayed on the outskirts unnoticed. I always do. Then from somewhere deep in my bag, my secure phone buzzed. Only 3 people have that number. I glanced around, no one was looking, and pulled the device out under the table. The screen showed a single message. Stand by. May need you soon. No name. No sender ID, but I knew the signature. It was Langford, the FBI director himself. I slipped the phone back into its hidden slot and smoothed my dress. Something was happening. You learn to live in dualities in this line of work. There's the you, your family knows, the quiet girl who never dated much, who showed up alone to holidays and left early. The one who didn't argue when they said you were wasting your life at some government desk job. And then there's the real you, the one who's seen what evil looks like in a child's eyes, what desperation smells like in a locked shipping container, what silence sounds like after a wiretap goes dead. You don't get medals for those things. You don't tell your family at Thanksgiving that you spent the night before recovering the body of a missing child. You just swallow it, again and again. That's what I did, swallowed it. But something felt different today. The buzz from Langford wasn't protocol. I wasn't technically on call. My last op wrapped 2 weeks ago. If he reached out now, something serious was coming. I kept my posture relaxed, sipping water, smiling politely when guests passed by. But I was scanning constantly, watching. That's when I saw him. A man in a suit, not tuxedo, not a guest, dark glasses, earpiece, clean shaven. He wasn't part of the staff. He wasn't carrying anything. He wasn't joking with anyone. He was still watching the crowd. And I knew him. Agent Coles, Counter Intel. We worked together on the Halberd leak case 2 years ago. If Coles was here, this wasn't just social. It was operational. I stood slowly, walked to the far end of the garden near the restrooms, away from view, and waited. Coles approached without looking at me. You weren't supposed to be called unless it escalated, he murmured, gaze fixed on the distance. Langford pinged me. What's going on? He handed me a folded paper napkin. Inside, scribbled in faint ink, were 5 letters. S-D-E-R-F. I blinked. This is confirmed. Coles gave a curt nod. Target might be nearby. Surveillance caught chatter about the venue. We don't know if it's a test or a real op. Langford wanted someone with eyes already inside. I glanced back at the tables, the golden lights, the murmuring families. I thought about Aunt Marjorie, still sipping rosé, completely oblivious that a potential domestic terror thread was hovering just outside her curated reality.
My reality. I'll stay alert, I said quietly. No engagement unless greenlit.
Coles nodded and disappeared into the hedge path like a ghost.
I stood alone for a moment, my fingers tightening around the napkin. They'd invited me here as a formality, an afterthought.
And now I was the only line between their perfect day and something catastrophic. The irony wasn't lost on me. Back at the table, I sat down like nothing had changed. I folded the napkin into a neat square and slipped it under my plate. Then I looked around again, faces, eyes, movements. My cousin Lindsay was twirling on the dance floor, dress flowing like a cloud. Her new husband, what was his name again? Brent Brandon, was beaming at her. The photographer hovered near them, capturing every moment like it was a magazine spread. It all looked so ordinary. But I knew better.
Ordinary is often the best cover for chaos.
My mother used to say I was too serious, that I needed to smile more, that life wasn't always a crisis. She didn't know what I knew. Across the yard, I saw another suit, different build. Not Cole's. Unfamiliar. No smile, no drink in hand, no interaction. I made a mental note. If Langford was right, and SDERF was here, then this was no longer a family event. It was a target,
and I wasn't just a guest anymore.
I was the asset. The irony made me smile faintly, because just 10 minutes earlier, Aunt Marjorie had called me average, and now I might be the only reason she'd lived to see her daughter's honeymoon. The music swelled. The band shifted to an upbeat jazz tune, and the dance floor filled with swaying silhouettes and clinking glasses. From a distance, everything looked perfect, timeless even. But under the varnish of elegance, I felt the quiet pulse of danger humming like a second heartbeat. I'd seen it before. Moments before, a sting goes sideways. Seconds before a gun is drawn. It's not the noise, it's the silence before the noise. It's the way people move a little too quickly or not at all. I watched the man in the dark suit from earlier. He hadn't moved from his spot near the side gate. His eyes scanned lazily, but with rhythm, like a man looking for something or someone. I reached for my phone beneath the table, tapping a coded phrase into the secure app. Visual confirm, asset monitoring, potential engagement. A response came almost instantly. Maintain, no exposure, backup 4 mins out. 4 minutes. I could do a lot in 4 minutes. Nina, a voice snapped me out of focus. It was Aunt Marjorie again. She was holding 2 glasses of champagne, one clearly for me whether I wanted it or not. I haven't seen you dance all night, she said, forcing a smile. You do know how to have fun, don't you? I stood and took the glass, pretending. Of course.
She leaned in again, just like before, voice dripping condescension. Don't be shy, dear. I know it's hard when everyone else is moving on. Marriage promotions, real milestones.
Her words hung in the air, sharp and saccharine.
I sipped the champagne and smiled. I suppose not all milestones are meant to be seen.
She blinked, confused, for half a second. Then the microphone at the DJ booth screeched, interrupting her next insult. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ beamed. Please welcome the bride's father to the stage for a toast. Applause followed. A cheer rose from the groom's side of the family. Aunt Marjorie looked toward the stage, then back at me, visibly relieved to be released from our conversation. I moved quietly through the crowd, slipping along the periphery of the gathering closer to the man in the suit. I didn't approach him directly. I positioned myself at a 45-degree angle, about 10 feet away, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid suspicion. He noticed me. Our eyes locked, just a flicker, just a breath. He turned, slightly hand-brushing something at his waist under his jacket. Weapon.
Not a guest.
Not security.
Not FBI.
He looked past me toward the reception tent, toward the bride and groom. His eyes lingered. He shifted his weight. I tapped the ring on my finger twice, covert signaling device. A tiny transmitter under the stone sent a tone pulse straight to the mobile unit parked down the road. Within seconds, the voice in my earpiece crackled to life. Copy visual. Subject identified as Matteo Cursi. Unaffiliated contractor. Known ties to SDERF cell. No confirmed current warrants. Last seen in Prague. Kersey. I remembered that name. Interpol dossier flagged for surveillance in 2 European attacks. A ghost. And now standing under fairy lights at my cousin's wedding. Instructions, I whispered, eyes never leaving him. Hold. Do not engage until team is in position. ETA 2 minutes. I exhaled slowly. 2 minutes felt like a lifetime. Then something shifted. Kersey moved. He turned, walking directly toward the open bar. Nothing suspicious in his pace, but too casual. Like someone trying too hard to look natural. I moved too. I approached from the opposite direction, pretending to scan the drink menu. He stopped at the bar, ordered something. A Manhattan. No ice. Same as in Prague. Then he glanced at his watch and reached into his jacket. My fingers twitched toward my concealed sidearm, but I stopped. He pulled out a phone. Typed something, sent it. I backed away and pretended to take a call, murmuring just loud enough for my mic. Possible message sent. Need trace on comms. A pause. Message intercepted. 1 line, ready for signal. Signal. What signal? The air shifted again. Somewhere across the tent, I saw a flicker, a lens catching the light. Someone photographing the cake, or something else. A chill traced my spine. I needed eyes higher up. I stepped away from the bar and moved swiftly toward the bridal suite upstairs, empty. Now the bridal party long since moved to the floor below. It offered a full view of the venue. I picked the lock quietly and entered the room. Dark, quiet, smelled faintly of flowers and hairspray. I went straight to the window and peered out. From here I saw them. 2 other figures. Not guests, not staff. One on the ridge behind the tent, one near the rear kitchen exit. A triangle. Classic formation for surveillance, or worse. My earpiece came alive again. Backup team has arrived. Moving to your location. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. I didn't respond. I was watching Kersey again. He was standing near the edge of the dance floor now, pretending to sip his drink, hand still on his phone. Then the lights flickered. Just once. Then again. A signal. Not a malfunction. And in that second I knew something was about to happen. And I was the only one ready for it. I ran. Down the narrow hallway of the estate's 2nd floor, heels in hand, footsteps silent against the hardwood. I had 20 seconds, maybe less. I'd seen this before on embassy rooftops inside border tunnels, even once in the middle of a baby shower in Beirut. When signals start flashing and ghosts like Kersey surface from the shadows, things move fast, and they move without mercy. I grabbed my comm from the inner lining of my clutch. This is Monroe. Visual triangulation confirmed. 3 operatives in motion. 1 on foot, possible signal initiator. Copy that, came Langford's voice, sharp and steady. Evac not possible without tipping your cover. If you engage, you do so alone. Of course. That's how it always is. From the corner window, I could still see Kersey. He was now holding something small in his palm, metallic, irregular, like a trigger or detonator. But he was smiling, laughing with another guest. I scanned the ridge line again. The man above was crouching now behind the lighting rig, a glint of black metal. Then I saw it. A rifle barrel. Sniper. God. I snapped back into motion, ducking out of the suite and flying down the staircase with rehearsed precision. Years of tactical training stripped all fear from my body, replacing it with focus. One thought pulsed through me like a drumbeat. Not here. Not now. Not these people. I emerged into the wedding hall again, breath even, dress, smooth face unreadable. To them, I was still just Nina, the quiet cousin with a boring job. I scanned for the bride. She was by the cake, radiant, oblivious. I turned my eyes to the groom's side. A few more unfamiliar men, too stiff, hands tucked, eyes scanning. No time. I raised my hand and tapped the ring once, an emergency pulse, the highest level alert in my protocol. Somewhere outside, a backup unit would scramble, but they wouldn't make it in time. I was the only one in position. Then I saw him, the sniper. He was moving, adjusting angle. I followed his trajectory, and my stomach turned. He wasn't aiming at the bride. He was aiming at Langford. The director himself, he was here. I hadn't seen him, but now I spotted him standing quietly near the tent entrance, blending in. A decoy move. Classic Langford. He came to verify, to watch, to trust me. And now he was in the crosshairs. Without thinking, I bolted through the tent. People turned to stare. Some gasped. Aunt Marjorie's mouth fell open, champagne flute midair. I didn't stop. At the edge of the dance floor, I dove literally into the side buffet table, knocking over candles and flowers, grabbing the silver cake knife in one hand and shoving over a speaker with the other. The sound cut out. Screeching feedback filled the air. Screams erupted. Kersey's head snapped toward me. And in that moment, I threw the knife. It sliced through the air and struck the sniper's scope. I heard the clatter from the ridge, and I ran. Through the service doors up the back stairs, bursting into the rooftop access. The sniper was scrambling to reload, caught between shock and aim. I tackled him. We went down hard, his weapon skidding across the tiles. He fought like someone trained. Brutal elbows, sharp knees. But I was faster, smarter. I slammed his head into the rooftop edge and cuffed him with my backup restraints. He hissed, "You don't know what you've done." I leaned in, close, voice steady. "You almost ruined a wedding." Down below, the chaos was spreading. Guests panicked. Someone yelled, "Shooter!" Others ducked under tables. Security was moving in finally. I pressed my comm. Target 1 detained. Rooftop. Second operative still unaccounted for. Langford's voice cut through. "Monroe, you just saved my life." My heart kicked. But I had no time for gratitude. I raced back down, ignoring the questions, the stares. I found Kersey trying to escape through the rear parking lot. I intercepted him, slamming his back into the catering van. His eyes widened. "You," I smiled. "Boring desk job, remember?" He tried to reach for something in his coat. I struck him first, one hit to the solar plexus, one to the jaw. He collapsed. I cuffed him too. "Second target neutralized," I said into my mic. "Venue secure, civilians unharmed." Langford was beside me moments later. He looked at the wreckage, the overturned cake, the shattered glasses, the terrified guests, and nodded slowly. "You did good," he said. "I couldn't be prouder." I looked past him to the reception tent where Aunt Marjorie stood frozen, staring at me like she'd never seen me before. She hadn't. Until now. As the FBI cleanup team moved in, I walked calmly back to my table. I picked up the champagne glass I'd left earlier, now half warm, and raised it in a quiet toast to no one in particular. And in that moment, just for a second, I allowed myself to feel it. Vindication. Not because they knew now, but because I never needed them to. Because while they had judged me by the surface, I had protected them from what they'd never understand. And I'd do it again, without applause, without a word. Just the quiet knowledge that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who hold the world together. The wedding was over. Not in the literal sense. Music eventually resumed. Guests hesitantly returned to their seats, and someone found another bottle of champagne to uncork over what was left of the cake. But in the deeper sense, the emotional rhythm of the evening had shifted permanently. People laughed too loudly, hugged too tightly, and avoided looking toward the ridge or the broken flower arrangements near the buffet. My family didn't know how to speak to me. They looked at me the way people look at lightning, awed, afraid, uncertain of where it might strike next. I'd seen that look before on the faces of young recruits hearing their first gunshot. On enemy combatants who realized too late that they'd underestimated me, but never from my own blood. I sat at a half-emptied table near the back. My hands were folded, my breathing calm, my expression neutral. I'd done what I was trained to do: identify, respond, neutralize. It didn't matter that it happened to be at a wedding. It didn't matter that half the guests would never forget the sight of me body slamming a man in a tuxedo. It was just another assignment, except it wasn't. I watched my cousin Beautiful in her disheveled wedding gown make her way toward me. She was barefoot, holding the hem of her dress in one hand and a bottle of rosé in the other. She stopped at my table. "Nina," she said softly, "can I sit?" I nodded. She dropped into the chair across from me, exhaling a long breath. Her eyeliner had smudged and her hair was falling out of its elegant twist. But she still looked radiant,
I always knew you were cool, she said, but damn. We both laughed genuinely for the first time that night. She leaned in, eyes glinting with a kind of wonder. Is it true? Are you like FBI or something beyond that? I said nothing. She smirked. Right, you can't say. She leaned back and looked at the tent now flickering with restrung fairy lights. I should be mad, you know. Cake's destroyed. People are terrified. Uncle Ron peed himself. I smiled gently. But you saved us? You saved me? I nodded once. That's the job. She blinked, then reached across the table and touched my hand. Thank you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. And it meant everything. Later, when the guests had mostly cleared out and the sky had turned velvet blue, I slipped away. No goodbyes, no explanations. I walked to the far edge of the estate where a black SUV waited. Langford stood beside it, arms folded. Monroe, he greeted me. Director, I replied. We stood in silence for a moment. He finally broke it. 3 arrests, no casualties, and a director still breathing. Not a bad day. Not the weirdest wedding I've been to, I said dryly. He chuckled. You have a gift for understatement. Langford studied me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. I read your report. Clean, efficient, but lacking something. What's that? Your voice, I frowned. You're excellent at reporting facts. But what about how it felt? I don't think that matters, I said. We're not trained for feelings. He nodded slowly. And yet you took down an armed sniper without backup. Protected 150 civilians while maintaining cover. And still had the clarity to intercept a fleeing target. That takes more than training. That takes instinct. I said nothing. Langford stepped closer. I've been looking for someone like you. Not just for field ops, but for something deeper. A role that requires judgment, empathy, discretion. He handed me a folder. I opened it. Classified briefing. Overseas assignment. Clandestine task force. Codename Artemis. I looked up. You've earned this, he said, and I think you're ready. My pulse quickened. Not out of fear, but purpose. On the flight back to D.C., I sat by the window watching the clouds scatter like ink on water. I replayed the evening in my mind, not the chaos, but the quiet moments, the way Aunt Marjorie had stared at me in disbelief, the way my cousin had held my hand, the way Langford had looked at me not like an asset, but like a person who mattered. I remembered being 13, sitting in my bedroom, overhearing my mother whisper to my Aunt Nina's not like the others. She doesn't shine. And maybe I didn't back then, but I wasn't made to shine. I was made to see what others couldn't, to step in when others ran, to fight silently without recognition, to protect what they never knew needed protecting. And as the wheels of the jet lifted from the tarmac, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not because I'd proven them wrong, but because I'd finally become the person I was always meant to be. And no one, no family member, no stranger, no enemy could ever take that from me again. 3 months passed. 3 months since the wedding. Since the sniper. Since Langford handed me that folder beneath the stars and changed the course of my life without a single order. I had been briefed, cleared, and reassigned not just to a new position, but to a new identity. Codename Artemis. Officially, I was on an administrative leave of absence. Unofficially, I was leading black site operations under a directive so buried it didn't even have an acronym. We weren't on the books. We weren't on maps. We weren't in anyone's budget. But we were real. And we were everywhere. Our base was a decommissioned naval station built into the cliffs of the Pacific Northwest. Quiet, unassuming, always gray. It suited me. I never liked places with too much sun. Inside, it was all brushed steel and silence. Operatives moved like shadows. No small talk, no birthdays, just intel and execution. They paired me with 2 others, Rafe, a former Delta operator with a scar that split his eyebrow in half, and Vega, an MI6 transfer with an accent sharp enough to cut steel. We didn't talk about our pasts. We didn't need to. What bound us wasn't memory. It was purpose. And every mission brought us closer.
I won't recount all of them, too much blood, too much secrecy, but there was one operation I still think about. The one that almost broke me. It started in Madrid. A tech summit. Fancy name tags, prettier cocktails. But underneath the suits and TED Talk smiles, something darker moved. Someone was selling biometric access codes to foreign buyers. Real-time face and gait data from US and EU citizens, enough to erase anyone's identity or steal 100 new ones. We were sent in to retrieve the data and neutralize the broker. But something went wrong. Vega disappeared during recon. Rafe found her comms device in a storm drain still blinking. I knew right then that this wasn't just a transaction. This was a trap. We tracked the signal to a parking garage 2 blocks away. I took point weapon drawn nerves still. Years of training had taught me how to clear rooms, how to breathe under pressure, how to shoot before someone else does. But nothing prepares you for the moment when you find your teammate gagged, bound bloodied in the back seat of a bomb-wired sedan. And standing outside that car was Kersey. Again, only this time he wasn't smiling. He saw me and raised his hands not in surrender, but in that smug, theatrical way he always had. Like this was a game, and we were playing pieces. Nina, he purred, or should I say Agent Artemis now? I didn't answer. You're wondering why I'm not dead yet. He continued, stepping slowly toward me. Why Langford didn't finish the job. Why you didn't. I kept my weapon level. Move, and I'll put one through your knee. Oh, I know you will. He smiled again, and for a moment I felt cold. But first, listen. He told me everything. About the mole in our ranks. About the fake assignment Vega was fed. About how the summit wasn't just bait, it was a test. Of me. Langford wanted to see if you'd break, Kersey said. If you'd hesitate. If the quiet little cousin from Virginia still flinched when family got too close to the fire. My hand tightened on the grip. You passed, he whispered, but barely. I didn't kill him. Not then. I neutralized the bomb, cut Vega free, and arrested Kersey for the second time, though we both knew he wouldn't stay locked up for long. Langford debriefed me personally. You're being watched, he admitted. Internally. Not everyone thinks you're ready for this level. I don't care, I said. You should, he replied. That night, I sat alone in my quarters, a bare metal room with no windows, and a cot that smelled like bleach. I stared at the wall and thought about how many masks I'd worn. Daughter, cousin, clerk, agent, ghost. I wondered if there was anything left beneath them. But then, I remembered the moment in the garage, the sound of Vega gasping behind me, the way my hands never shook the clarity in my mind. I remembered that I didn't freeze. Not anymore. And I knew this was who I was now. Not because Langford believed in me. Not because I passed some test. But because I'd been forged in fire and I came out steel. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Unmarked envelope, handwritten, from my cousin. It read, Nina, I don't know what you really do and I don't want to. But whatever it is, thank you. The world is lucky to have you in it. Be safe. Love, Kate. I folded the letter and placed it in the only personal item I kept, a tiny silver box I'd had since childhood. It was dented, tarnished. But it had survived everything. Just like me. My world had narrowed. Gone were the family dinners, the holiday texts, the old neighborhood rituals. In their place, encrypted calls, false passports, and mission dossiers sealed in black binders. I didn't miss the noise. I missed the stillness, the kind you only notice when you've been trained to hear what others ignore. But one mission would shatter even that silence. It came coded. Langford never used emotion, but his voice that day. It was strained. Agent Artemis, we've received chatter from domestic intelligence. Domestic, that was rare. We believe a high-value target has infiltrated an FBI secure site. The name hasn't been confirmed, but you'll want to see this in person. When I opened the file, my chest went cold. It was him, my father. Except not as I remembered him, not as the ghost who had walked out of our lives when I was 15, leaving behind a trail of unpaid debts, and a mother who never looked up from her drink again. This man was a different creature. False identity, embedded with an extremist militia flagged in multiple federal watch lists, working as an IT consultant inside a government contractor facility. Codename Obsidian. I stared at the image. Same eyes, same crooked nose, but older, harder, and in his hand, a visitor badge to a weapons research site in New Mexico. Langford gave me the option to recuse myself. I didn't. Instead, I requested full clearance and lead authority. It's personal, I admitted, but not emotional. He didn't argue, just handed me the access card and said, "You'll need to go dark." I was already halfway there. The facility was sterile white walls, humming machines, and guards who didn't make eye contact. I walked in under an alias black wig-tinted glasses the works. 2 hours in, I saw him. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I wasn't the girl he abandoned. I was the woman who had been rebuilt from her own ashes. I followed him discreetly, logged his interactions, photographed his access points, built the case from scratch. And then on the 4th day, I confronted him. We were alone in a service stairwell late at night. I waited until the cameras looped and the corridor cleared. He turned the corner and saw me. "Can I help?" he started, then stopped. His eyes narrowed. "Nina." I didn't flinch. He backed up a step. You look like her." "I am her." For a moment, he was speechless. The kind of silence that wraps around you like smoke. I thought, they said you went into admin work. Federal desk job. I didn't reply. He tried to smile. That's good. Stability. You were always the quiet one." I pulled out the evidence photos logs intercepted messages. His face drained of color. "Where did you get this?" "From watching you," I said. "You're FBI." His voice cracked. "Worse," I said. "I'm the one they send when the FBI isn't enough." He leaned against the railing, stunned. I didn't know he whispered. "I swear, Nina. I didn't know it would go this far. I was just trying to make up for things. I needed money." I stepped closer. "You didn't just leave us, Dad. You disappeared. You let Mom drown in debt. You let me grow up thinking I wasn't worth staying for." "I made mistakes." "No," I said. "You made choices." He stared at me, seeing perhaps for the first time what I had become. Not his daughter. Not a child. A weapon, forged from the void he left behind. I made the arrest. No brutality, no shouting. Just the silence of handcuffs and a cold hallway. When the transport team arrived, I turned to leave. "Nina," he called out. I stopped. "Are you going to tell your family?" I looked at him, truly looked at him. "They don't need to know," I said. "They've mourned you once already." Back at headquarters, Langford debriefed me personally. He watched me closely. "You did the job. Clean." "I always do." He hesitated. "How do you feel?" "Like I finished something." He nodded, then handed me a new dossier. "This one's international. Bigger. Riskier. But after what I just saw, you're ready." I took the file, but I didn't open it yet. Instead, I went home. Not to my official residence, to Virginia. I stood in front of my childhood home, smaller than I remembered paint-peeling porch, creaking with each step. I knocked on the door. My mother answered, wrapped in a sweater far too big for her frame. She stared at me for a long second, then said, "Nina." I nodded. She pulled me into a hug, trembling, sobbing. And for the first time in years, I cried too. Because in that moment, I wasn't Agent Artemis. I wasn't a ghost. I was a daughter. And I had come home not to explain who I had become, but to show that I had survived. It was supposed to be a standard extraction, in and out. No trace, no names. But by then, I should have known nothing in my life was ever that simple. The mission came from the top. Langford didn't call this time. He appeared in person. A quiet knock on my temporary apartment door, a hard look in his eyes. He handed me a file thicker than usual. Target International Arms Broker, operating under diplomatic immunity. Location Prague. Codename Warden. The intel was chilling. The broker wasn't just trafficking weapons. He was smuggling information, military-grade blueprints, secure communications, tactical plans, leaking them to entities we didn't even have names for. "The catch?" I asked. Langford paused. "He's surrounded by powerful people who will protect him at all costs." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one he doesn't know yet." I was wheels down in Prague by midnight. It was late winter. Snow along the Charles Bridge. Shadows thick and silent. The city smelled like history and danger. I went in as someone else, of course. False passport, new accent, clean background. I wore an earpiece, but most of the work was quiet. Solitary. The gala was held in a converted cathedral, Gothic spires, golden chandeliers, and whispers that echoed off marble columns. I wore black, simple and precise. Not too noticeable. Just enough to slip between conversations unnoticed. And then I saw him. Warden. He was younger than I'd imagined. Clean-cut, charming, the kind of face that made headlines and then disappeared before the article hit print. He smiled at people with practiced warmth. He touched shoulders lightly, casually. But his eyes, those didn't smile. They calculated, counted exits, noted vulnerabilities. I kept my distance at first, let him notice me, which of course he did. American? He said, slipping beside me near the bar.
Romanian, I lied.
Romanian, he echoed, eyes narrowing slightly. But you speak with no accent.
Boarding school, I said. London and Switzerland before that. He smiled. Of course, you don't look like someone who stays in one place long.
Neither did he. The dance began. Drinks, glances, polite flattery. He wanted to know more. Where I lived, who I worked for, why I was there.
I fed him pieces. Not too obvious, not too shallow. Just enough to get invited into his world.
Within a week, I was sitting in the back of his limousine watching the city blur past as he talked about global markets and how fragile peace was. How do you sleep at night? I asked him once.
He turned, lips curled into a cold grin. I don't.
I had what I needed. Voice recordings, secure locations, names of buyers, transfer codes, even a slip of a document that had the Pentagon seal burned into the corner. I called Langford.
We're ready.
The raid was planned, coordinated across 3 countries, Interpol, NATO liaisons, and our own embedded agents. Everything was locked, until it wasn't. The night of the operation, everything fell apart. Our agents were exposed. Doors were locked. The safe house where I'd stored the evidence was compromised. Warden had known.
For days, maybe weeks.
He didn't run. He didn't hide. He invited me to dinner. I went. I had no choice. He met me at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Vltava River. Elegant, private, cold. You're very good, he said, pouring the wine himself. Almost perfect. But not quite, I said.
No, he agreed, because you cared.
He leaned forward.
You wanted to bring me in clean. You wanted a trial, justice. But I don't live in that world.
Neither do I said calmly. And that's when I slipped the USB into the hidden slot under the table. A silent signal. A tracker. The team would find us now if they weren't already dead. You think this ends with me in cuffs? He sneered. I said nothing. Because I didn't need to. The explosion didn't happen near us. It happened across the city.
The warehouse he used to store stolen intel gone in a flash of fire.
I saw it from the balcony reflected in the glass of his wine. He stood up slowly, shaking. You burned it, he whispered. I nodded.
You'll be hunted.
I already am. Warden lunged for me, then hands around my neck, rage blinding. But I had trained for this. 2 swift strikes, one to his ribs, one to his throat. He collapsed, gasping. I cuffed him with my own hands as the strike team burst through the door. Langford called 15 minutes later. It's done. Clean, I said. And you... I looked at my reflection in the window. Bruised. Alive. Cold. I'm still here, I replied. On the flight home, I sat alone. The plane hummed quietly. Outside, the stars drifted. I opened my bag and pulled out a small envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside was Kate's letter, the one from months ago.
The world is lucky to have you in it.
I folded it gently and placed it back.
I didn't know what tomorrow would bring.
But I knew this. I was no longer a woman hiding behind a desk. I was the shadow at the edge of every war. And I had just begun. When I returned to the States, I didn't tell anyone where I'd been. There were no headlines, no ceremony, no parades,
just me stepping off a nondescript military plane onto a private runway outside of D.C., hair tied back, coat zipped up against the cold. Langford gave me a slight nod from the tarmac and said simply, debrief tomorrow. Rest tonight.
But rest wasn't possible. Because the next morning, I had to do something even more daunting than confronting international arms dealers. I had to attend my cousin's wedding. I almost didn't go.
For weeks, the invitation sat on my kitchen counter untouched. It wasn't just the usual tension. It was the memories. The time they told me I wasn't real career material. The time my aunt asked if I was still filing papers for a living. The time my uncle said I must be lonely with no one and nothing to show. And all those moments, I said nothing. But this time, something in me shifted. Not anger, not pride, just a quiet certainty. I had faced bullets, betrayal, and backroom deals in crumbling cities most Americans couldn't even point to on a map. And still, their words had once cut deeper. But not anymore. The wedding was being held at a high-end vineyard in Northern Virginia. I arrived alone. No dramatic car, no retinue, no announcement, just a black dress. Clean lines, minimal jewelry, a calm face. I parked far from the main entrance, walked quietly through the gravel path, and entered just as the reception was beginning. Eyes turned. My aunt gasped, not in horror, but in mild annoyance. "You came," she said flatly, as if I had broken some unspoken agreement to stay gone. "Yes," I said, my voice soft. "I came." She smiled tightly. "Well, we didn't plan for extra seating. I hope you don't mind sitting near the bar." I nodded without flinching. The night played out like I expected. Laughter that excluded me. Questions that poked without curiosity. Snide remarks about my desk job, followed by shallow stories of others' promotions, vacations, investments. At one point, someone joked, "So, what do you actually do all day? Alphabetize files?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because something else was about to speak for me. It started with a disruption near the kitchen. At first, I thought it was a drunk guest, but then I saw the silhouette, tall, poised, unmistakable. Langford, Director Langford, of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, wearing his badge like a thunderclap, and behind him, 2 agents in full tactical dress. Every fork in the room paused midair. The music faded. My aunt's mouth slowly parted. Langford scanned the room. Then his eyes landed on me. He took a slow step forward, pulled a black phone from his pocket, and said clearly, "Agent Monroe, we have a situation. We need you now." Time stopped. My cousin dropped her champagne glass. My uncle dropped his smile. Even the DJ forgot to breathe. I stood, calmly, without explanation, and walked toward Langford. He handed me the phone. I listened for a moment. "Understood," I said. Then I turned to face the stunned room. And I said only one thing: "Thank you for dinner." The door closed behind me like a punctuation mark. Outside, a black SUV waited, engine running. Langford opened the door for me himself. As I slid inside, I glanced back through the window and saw their faces, pale, open-mouthed, rewiring years of judgment in a single, silent moment. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even vindication. It was truth. Undeniable. Heavy. Final. We sped away into the night. Langford sat beside me and said, "I wasn't sure you'd let me do that." I wasn't sure either, I admitted. "But you did," he said. "Yes," I whispered. "I did." Because the war inside me, the one between silence and voice shame and worth, was finally over. And I had won. Not with noise, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of simply being who I always was. The only difference, they finally saw it. The SUV moved swiftly through the darkness, headlights cutting through the Virginia fog like a blade. But inside, the silence was peaceful. For once, I wasn't rehearsing comebacks in my head. I wasn't folding my hands to hide the shaking. I wasn't bracing for another jab from a family member who never really knew me. I just existed, and that was enough. Langford spoke quietly. "You okay?" I nodded. "More than okay." He gave a small smile. "They finally saw you." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because tonight hadn't been about proving anything to them. It was about proving something to myself, that I no longer had to shrink for the comfort of people who never bothered to look deeper. The operation that night was classified. I can't say where we went or what we stopped, only that it was dangerous, fast, and critical, and that I did my job like I always did, with precision, with calm, and without asking for applause. But something was different. I moved through the corridors of that mission with a stillness I hadn't felt before. A clarity, a release. All those years I had buried myself in this work, not just out of duty,
but out of a need to belong somewhere. And now, for the first time, I knew I belonged to myself. A few days later, I received a package.
No return address, just my name handwritten.
Inside was a photo. It was from the wedding. Someone had snapped the moment Langford stood beside me, the room frozen in collective disbelief. On the back, scribbled in unfamiliar cursive, was a single line. "We had no idea. We're sorry." There was no signature. It could have been anyone, my cousin, my aunt, even my mother. But I didn't need to know. I folded the photo, placed it in my drawer, and closed it without locking it.
Letting go doesn't mean forgetting.
It means no longer needing to carry it. Weeks passed. Life returned to its quiet rhythm of briefings, missions, coded calls, and long silences. And yet something inside had shifted. I started saying yes more often. To small joys, to dinners with colleagues, to walking instead of driving, to soft music at night. One evening, I even said yes to a stranger who asked if the seat next to me was taken. His name was Aaron. He didn't ask what I did for work. He just asked what I liked to cook, where I wanted to travel, what made me laugh. And for once, I told the truth. Not the classified truth, but the emotional one. That I used to feel invisible. That I once sat at the kids' table well into adulthood. That it took the sound of the FBI director calling my name to finally believe my own worth. He listened and didn't flinch. I don't know what the future holds. But I know this. I am no longer the woman who walks into rooms and hopes not to be noticed. I am the woman who knows her value even if no one else says it out loud. I am the woman who didn't raise her voice, but still made them listen. I am Agent Nina Monroe, and I am done hiding. To anyone watching this story, maybe you've been dismissed. Maybe they sat you at the back, told you that your dreams were too big, your job too small, your voice too quiet. Maybe they said you weren't enough. I'm here to tell you, you are. And one day, when you least expect it, the world will stop and turn toward you, not because you shouted, but because your presence can no longer be denied. Until then, walk with dignity. Hold your silence like armor. And when the time comes, rise.
Not for them, but for you.